In that troubled American town, I, Alex Harvey, found myself caught in a whirlpool of drama and betrayal within my family. My father, Harold, once a passionate train engineer, had his dreams of becoming a painter shattered in a sudden accident, leaving an unhealable wound. My cousin, Jason Miller, who has always been the favorite in the family, borrowed $19,000 from me on the pretext of starting a business. However, he squandered the money on round-the-world travel and gambling. When I discovered the truth, I was incandescent with rage and sued him. But to my heartbreak, my family, including my parents, sided with him without exception. Shortly after, Jason shamelessly approached me again, hoping I would lend him another $7,000 from the previous loan. I initially refused firmly. However, my parents exerted tremendous pressure on me, forcing me to agree. Bombarded by my family, I reluctantly compromised. Jason once again promised to repay me within 6 months, by which time his business would be up and running. Yet 6 months passed, and he hadn't even started his business. Instead, he spent the $7,000 on personal pleasures again. He traveled to Asia, bought the latest gaming console, and gambled away the rest. I remember the day he came to borrow money. His parents and mine were all there. He looked extremely guilty, and vowed to make amends. To prove his determination, he actually asked me for money again, and swore he'd use it for his startup this time. I burst out laughing, and was about to refuse, when my aunt suddenly interrupted. She screamed hysterically about the importance of family support, and started constantly urging me to lend him the money. This wasn't surprising to me, as Jason and I had always been treated differently. I remember when I was 16, I worked overtime at a restaurant to save money for a car. Jason, on the other hand, didn't have to work on his 16th birthday. The family threw him a lavish party, and gifted him a brand new car, with a big red bow tied to it. What hurt me more was my family's attitude towards him. They believed Jason deserved the best of everything, and no one seemed to notice my efforts. When I finally saved enough money to buy a used car, there was no celebration. I felt like my efforts were never valued. And one Thanksgiving, when Jason wrecked his new car while racing with friends, my family didn't blame him. They just chuckled and moved on. My uncle even directly wrote him a check to cover the repair costs. If it had been me, I might have been grounded for months. Such things always happened. When Jason struggled in school, the family would hire a tutor for him and blame the teachers. When I encountered problems, they always told me to solve them myself. Jason always got what he wanted, while I had to fight for everything. The family treated him like a special person, while I was always told to be self-reliant. My mother always told me to be patient, saying Jason had done a lot for the family before, and he would do the same for me in the future. Indeed, Jason had helped the family before. He helped his aunt pay off overdue credit card bills, and covered his cousin's rent. When she lost her job, my family always reminded me of these small deeds, as if these tiny favors made him some kind of hero. But they forgot that Jason never worried about his bills, because his uncle always paid his car loan, and his aunt bailed him out when his credit card debt was too high. As college tuition was fully paid, he never experienced budget constraints, or had to choose between paying electricity bills and rent. Of course, he could occasionally give someone a few $100s, but no one had lent him as much as the $17,000 I did. He was always the one giving help, not borrowing. My family never asked him to do anything on such a large scale, but when I asked him for my money back, he couldn't face it. Later, we had an argument. I gathered the family, and demanded that Jason repay me. As I spoke, I looked around, hoping for some support, but I only saw blank expressions. My father just shrugged, while Jason sat there with his arms crossed, looking smug, as if he didn't need to explain anything. My aunt, who had once been helped by Jason, broke the silence, saying I was overreacting, and that family shouldn't only talk about money. She said I was creating rifts over insignificant things, and that if anyone among us died, we would all miss each other. She always liked to say this if I die stuff, but that wasn't the point. I needed my money, and she treated it like pocket money. I had worked hard to save that money, sacrificing time with friends, taking 2 jobs to work overtime, and budgeting every meal. Now, my family thought it was no big deal for Jason to squander my hard-earned money on a lavish lifestyle. I said he promised to repay me, but 6 months had passed, and he had given me nothing but excuses. Meanwhile, he was living a carefree life, while I was still wondering if he'd ever see that money again. Before Jason could respond, my uncle, who had been silent, told me he was disappointed in our current behavior. He said Jason was doing something meaningful for the family's future, and that in a few years, the $17,000 wouldn't matter to us at all. We should be proud of having helped him early on. I felt nauseated. I told him it was okay and left. I knew arguing with them was a waste of time. I realized my family wouldn't help me, so I decided to take action myself. In the following weeks, I stopped attending any family gatherings. Every time I thought about seeing them, I felt nauseated. I started collecting evidence of Jason's spending habits. I knew Jason had been squandering the money, and although his Instagram posts were public, I needed more substantial evidence, so I started digging deeper, checking public records, tracing his purchase history, and investigating his supposed business investments. But it confirmed my suspicions. He hadn't made any business investments at all. He used my $17,000 to buy a luxury car, enjoy several lavish vacations, and furnish his new apartment with high-end furniture. With this information, I decided to hire a financial investigator for help. It was a difficult decision, because it meant dragging an outsider into family disputes, but I saw no other option. The investigator could further track Jason's expenses, and provided a detailed report outlining where my money was spent. When I saw the final report, I felt a mixture of emotions. Relief because I finally had conclusive evidence, and anger because I had let things escalate to this point. But now I had undeniable proof. My plan was to show this evidence to my family, so they could finally see the truth. When I gathered the family again, I knew it wouldn't be easy. But I thought, with this evidence in hand, they would finally believe me. I was wrong. Sitting at the same dining table, I presented all the evidence, including the investigator's report, public records, and the screenshots of Jason's lavish spending. I even prepared a timeline detailing how Jason had been using the money for his benefit, since I lent it to him. Jason again tried to explain that he needed to invest in himself, and that even though he had lost control a bit, he would repay every penny, but the damage was done. The evidence showed Jason was lying, and now everyone in the room knew it. I thought I had outplayed him. He was playing checkers, while I was playing chess. But even after they heard all the evidence, and saw it with their own eyes, my family still chose to side with Jason. They refused to hold him fully accountable. My father sighed, and rubbed his temples, obviously frustrated. He wanted me to understand that Jason was under pressure, and was just trying to make something of himself. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. Jason didn't accidentally take my money, and forget to repay me. My uncle sighed, and for a moment, I thought he finally understood how I felt. But no, he just reminded me that family is more important than money. They didn't want this issue to tear us apart. I stood up, feeling everything heavy. I couldn't argue with them anymore, nor could I pretend that everything was fine. The next day, I went to a lawyer, and filed a fraud lawsuit against Jason. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the only option left for me. My family chose to protect Jason at my expense, and I wouldn't let it go. I had worked too hard for that money, and I wouldn't let it slip away easily. When my lawyer served him with the summons, I knew it would lead to my family cutting ties with me. The lawsuit threw my family into chaos. Jason, who had been avoiding me for months, suddenly started calling me incessantly. He begged me to drop the charges, and promised he would find a way to repay me. But I couldn't forget his betrayal. As for Jason, his reputation had taken a nosedive, of course. Instead of feeling happy about it, I felt like I was on the verge of depression. At first, the room was silent. What I expected was shock, maybe some apologies for not believing me before. But what I got was disbelief. My mother said, I must have made a mistake. Jason wouldn't do such a thing. Jason tried to gloss over it, saying some of the money was used for business expenses, and that while he did spend some on himself, that was normal in business. He said he needed to look successful to be successful. I confronted him again, telling him he had taken my money under false pretenses, and used it for his benefit, which was fraud. Tension filled the room. My father's face turned red. My uncle shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and my mother stared at Jason, as if waiting for some magical explanation to make everything better. Then, my mother gave me a sorrowful look, as if I were the one who had done something wrong, instead of standing by my side. She hinted that maybe I should give Jason some more time. After all, Jason wouldn't deliberately hurt me. Her words hurt more than I had anticipated. How could they still see him as the victim? I was the one being left out. Yet they acted as if I were the one creating problems. It wasn't about giving him time. It was about trust. Jason had broken that trust.